In the 1992 Belgian mockumentary Man Bites Dog, we follow a crew of student filmmakers as they create a documentary following the day-to-day actions of a serial killer. Initially, they're disinterested in their observations, but eventually find that as the violence begins to escalate and funding issues lead to the crew relying on their own subject for money, the filmmakers find themselves taking an active role as an accomplice to the murders they sought merely to document. Hello, I'm Daniel Wadsworth, and in this video I'm going to be talking about 3 games centered around seeing, or in one case hearing, what we were never meant to, and the interesting places developers can take that.
The loose is loose!
The first game we're going to talk about is Do Not Feed the Monkeys, developed by Ficturama and released in 2018. When starting Do Not Feed the Monkeys, you are greeted with a faux computer desktop and presented an end-user license agreement for the Primate Observation Club. This agreement specifically says to have access to this club we're about to join, you must never feed the monkeys. Once you have accepted and we are shown the monkey cages, we find out what that really means. The cages are camera feeds, 4 of them playing in real time on your screen, all without contextual information or even the awareness of the people on camera. If you ever use those sites that randomly log you into unsecured security cameras, this is the exact same kind of deal. You're watching people in any random place on the planet without them having the faintest clue. If you want to stay in the club, and you're going to want to, you're going to need to have to buy access to even more cameras at $50 each before an evaluation day. And you're told that rent is due, and you also are going to have to eat and manage your sleep. A friend of ours messages us. She is the one who brought us into the club, and she seems very excited about it all. When we mention how we could possibly afford all this, she says we will find various menial jobs posted on our door each day, and there's always opportunities that the cages themselves present. In Do Not Feed the Monkeys, much like with me after figuring out how to bypass the parental filter in high school, you watch, and all you do outside of watching is to make sure you watch more. Besides just watching, the camera feeds themselves make for excellent little detective puzzles. They're complete with multiple endings as you figure out in what way you can use the information provided by the camera to have an advantage on the outside world. To help facilitate this, you are able to take down keywords or objects within the camera's view, and it all goes into a notebook. Coupled with being able to put key points of dialogue into this notebook as well, you can then search these terms in an in-game search engine. Oftentimes the best results are coupling multiple of the words together. Here's one pretty simple cage that I quite like. So the feed features a cornfield with a windmill and antenna on either extremes of its vision. Searching either antenna or windmill yield nothing useful, but at certain times an antique steam train comes past the field. Selecting that gives us the antique locomotive search term, and combined with windmill, antique locomotive gives us a news article for the opening of the steam engine line and its name, the Old Hay Train. Searching the Old Hay Train then gives us its web page listing its full circular route. It begins in a city, then the next destination is a place called Sharp Mountains Gorge, then Browning Field, and then Willow Woods before returning. Now only one of them, Browning Fields, fits what we see on the camera, so now we search Browning Fields and find a satellite image of exactly where our camera is. Now with our location confirmed, we hit a dead end, until several days later a crop circle appears in the field. Searching crop circle gives us the number for a crop circle research hotline. Calling that and giving the correct location that we worked out earlier closes the case of the cage and gives us a substantial payout. While that camera was rather straightforward, moral complexity is introduced when you become able to make and sell recordings on the cameras and even send items to the people in them. So some of the cameras are just straight bad and good choices, with bad giving you a bigger payout. Probably the idea is that, like the filmmakers in Man Bites Dog, the financial pressure we are under causes us to become more involved. An example of this is a camera featuring an elderly janitor trapped in a lift. He's only up at very odd hours, and even when we figure out the building that he's in, we can't convince anyone to find him and rescue him until we learn a secret passion of his that only someone who knew him, or in our cases watching him, would know. So you spend all this time and research on this guy, and when you finally have it all set to get him rescued, you get a sudden call offering you $300 just to let him die. Something that doesn't even make a profit in the long run, as saving the janitor gets you a very useful and lucrative janitorial part-time job permanently. It's very Bioshock 1-esque where the choice system is just a binary straight good or dumb option. If financial pressure was higher in the game, I imagine this would have worked better. But even in the first playthrough, I found myself really needing money, so don't expect to be forced into making decisions you know are wrong, like We the Revolution, Penitent, or Pathologic do in their gameplay. But it isn't all bad, and I feel the game does a good job of highlighting the funny, hidden absurdity that can be found in the mundane things we just walk past every day. There's a short film by Ruben Östlund. You can find it on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. It's called Incident by a Bank. And it's a perfectly accurate single-take reenactment of a failed bank robbery that the director himself witnessed in 2006. And one thing it shows is just how something even as wild as a gun-wielding bank heist, so many people just didn't even notice and walked right past. Like, this world is so wild and strange and intricately choreographed. A man could be shooting a gun in the building that you walk past every day, and you could easily just never know. There's this moment in the excellent The Boys TV show where Translucent, a superhero able to become invisible, explains that his true power isn't the invisibility, but the observation it allows him to perform. How he sees the real side of all people and just how powerful that makes him. And Do Not Feed the Monkeys captures this feeling perfectly. You really do get the weird thrill of seeing things you shouldn't and observing silently when others think nobody is. One moment I did get caught by the game and completely felt like I'd messed it up is a feed of cars coming into a petrol station. Using the camera info, you find out the location of the station has had a spate of random hit and runs by a single person, and this has caused an extremely violent vigilante group to appear trying to hunt them down. Besides obviously being able to find the killer, there are red herring lorries of multiple comedy objects stuck in them, like flamingo in the windscreen or pool toys, things like that. And I thought it'd be funny to record the lorries and sell the tapes for cash to this in-universe shock tape site. The problem is that the game specified that the license plate was visible in the video, and I hit upload anyway, and ended up reading about the driver of the lorry being burned alive and hunted down by the vigilante group. Like, that was completely my fault, and I should have listened. My personal favourite cage, though, and the last one I'll spoil, is inside a recording studio in the hometown of a former mega huge glam rock musician. He's recording a new song called Close the Curtain, and while his entire crew seem understandably quite concerned for his health as he's quite old, through research and listening to the lyrics and phone calls, you start to twig that he might be considering ending his own life. And with only a handful of days left, seemingly, from the conversations he's making, he often complains of the phone of pain, and that his past addictions mean he can't get pain medication that can help with whatever he finds himself struggling with. And you're left with a choice of, do you watch him suffer daily, or do you send pain medication to his house and accept whatever those consequences are? In an interesting, morally wise decision, if you send the pain medication to him, he is able to finish his last song before succumbing to a brain tumour he had hidden from everyone. Overall, the game is very much worth playing, or at least watching in my opinion, and for its overly simple puzzles and abundance of red herring cages that just leave you with nothing, the high notes here are more than worth at least one playthrough. But leaving the monkeys now, we are talking about 2019's Unheard by Chinese developer Next Studios. A crime-solving puzzle game, Unheard sees you as a detective tasked with solving various questions related to a crime with only audio information of just a few minutes prior to it being committed. But you aren't able to hear everything at once, and you must physically move around the crime scene as a sort of ghost. Story-wise, you find yourself in a windowless interrogation room and being told by a woman who seems to teleport around the room that you're a detective being used to test a new device allowing you to listen through time in an area to help solve unsolvable cases. You'll need to navigate around the scene of the crime to find which people and conversations to listen to, and so can the absolutely amazing engineering behind the sound of this game. Nothing I have ever played has pulled off spatial sound this well. I played this using Sennheiser 660s, and it's the only time I have seen spatial sound equivalent to that famous Barbershop stereo demo actually being done dynamically in a game.
Hello, Sergeant. May I please have my phones back?
Are you done? It was just a phone! Guy didn't even want to press charges, but you brought me in anyway just to hit me with some outrageous fine for petty theft.
You broke the law.
What? Doesn't surprise me that you're a rookie. No one else about an eye at something like this on night patrol. You're wasting everybody's time.
I've had just about enough of you. Thankfully, you won't be my problem much longer. Somebody paid your ticket.
I'm in no hurry. Though can't say the same for the guy whose phone I pinched. He looked like a real complainer. Excuse me, officer. Sorry to have to bother you.
Come on in.
Well, speak of the devil.
The desk sergeant wants a release form.
Mechanically, the game is very simple. We're shown a bird's eye view of a single floor of a building and a scene plays throughout the whole building, ending with whatever crime we are investigating occurring. Solving the crime involves answering multiple questions about the case, which are answered with the names of the people involved. Questions you are tasked to solve are often a bit more complex than just who did it, usually involving identifying code names used, tracking objects you can't even see, and in one case solving a murder that had happened 3 years before the one we are investigating. To help you, there's a note-taking system that allows you to place a reminder of an event upon the timeline to always show up on screen at that specific time. For instance, if you observe someone making a call and place a note of their name, you know if you're observing someone later and they take the call, your note will show, telling you who made it. Your last tool is a roster of all speaking characters in the scene's names, but it's your job to match the voice to the name by dragging the names onto them. Once they are identified though, you are able to track them throughout the scene. A game like this hinges upon how cleverly written the crimes are and how intuitive the way you solve them is. Of the 5 crimes you investigate, I would say all but the tutorial involve actually needing to think properly and deduce an answer for the questions posed, but there's usually at least one question simply solved by following everyone around until one guy just straight admits to it. But when this game does get you to think, it really does shine. Since there's only 5 levels in the main game, I won't spoil any of them in full, but give you some basic details and describe the process of solving one question in the first proper case. After a tutorial, you're thrust into the first case, which is involving art theft. You only get 2 questions to solve for this one. Who stole the real painting first? And who has the real painting in the end? Now, you might be thinking trying to follow a stolen painting when you can't even see is a bit of a problem, and you would be right. As we enter, we start in a conversation between 2 people. One, the artist whose work is about to be stolen, and the director of the exhibit. But the first thing that jumps out to you, probably because it's the only thing that can, is the voice acting. But there's a bit more to it than initially you might give the devs credit for. This is the artist in question, who is named the Maestro.
Look outside. Look at all those people staring at an empty frame, thinking it is my actual work. Tell me, Sean, just how many works of art from young, promising artists do you have in this gallery right now? 10? 20? You might as well have 0 for all it is worth to these people.
So that is certainly an interesting path the voice actor chose, and might be considered grating for some, but actually this was a very deliberate action on behalf of the devs because the whole game is about identifying voices, and this would be absolutely ruined if characters sounded too similar. So I am assuming the voice actors were told to bring more ham than a Danish amateur radio convention to every single character, and I'm completely admitting it massively helps. Especially when determining distant voices are those on other ends of the phones, the very distinctive styles of each character is a godsend. It doesn't help first impressions either that the Maestro is probably the most overblown of all these voices in the game and is the first one you actually hear in a proper case. The puzzles get harder from here, with the final one featuring a very fiendish question that involves following a trail of all inherently untrustworthy statements and using each one to eliminate the previous until you get your answer. But the real crescendo of the game design is a bonus free DLC scenario called The Lethal Script. Clocking in at an ear-numbing 21 minutes for the loop, when with over 15 characters, I feel this is less a DLC and more an elaborate revenge scheme against anyone who ever dared say the base game was too easy. Every difficulty complaint anyone could have possibly had has been thrown out the window so hard that it caused a multi-car pile-up and several deaths. We have conversations in the same room between multiple groups, we have people playing actors playing characters with the same names as other people in the same area, and we have even got another custody chain to unravel. Playing the Lethal Script feels like the entire previous game has just been an elaborate tutorial preparing you for just this case. Split into 2 parts, the DLC finds you investigating a hotel during a film audition. You'll not only need to work out the parts all the actors are playing, but the plot of the film as well. While the second part goes for a meta-narrative twist that completely knocked me on my ass. Like, I wouldn't expect this from a paid expansion, let alone free DLC scenarios. And I couldn't believe that the devs did something so clever and so fresh in something that they gave out for free. I'm really surprised and really impressed by it. Really, it's the highlight of the whole gameplay experience for me, and I've got to recommend that you have to play this. I'm not going to spoil any of it, I'm just going to tell you you have to play it. Overall, I feel the game is definitely worth it, despite how lean it is content-wise. The game also has an extra paid DLC chapter called
黑面观音
as well, but it hasn't been translated to English, so it seems for the time being at least, the content stops with the 5 base cases and the lethal script. My playthrough of the base game clocks in at just over 3 hours, and the lethal script upped it to under 6, so it's up to you if a truly unique and well-made experience is worth it despite a lowish running time. Finally, we are going to look at probably the best and most fleshed out example of a voyeur game, Beholder. Released by Aloha in 2016, Beholder is set in a Papers, Please-esque fictional authoritarian nation, where a labour lottery has placed you as a landlord of a small block of flats, and the title of Beholder has been granted to you, which obligates you to regularly report to a handler and inform your superiors of all information you can about the people in your charge. To aid in this task, you have the ability to hide security cameras in the smoke alarms of each flat, but they can cost a fair bit and take a while to install, so you have to be careful about the residents possibly coming back. You also need to search the belongings of your tenants and report anything breaching an ever-increasingly complex amount of bizarre laws. Once you find something in breach of a law, you can either file a police report or blackmail letter. Knowing when to do so is crucial to surviving the campaign. Besides reporting on crimes, you'll also be tasked with finding all general information you can about each of your tenants and assembling a Stasi-esque personality profile on them for a cash reward. With the more aspects of personality you discover, the bigger the payout. Your family also needs to be taken care of as well, in featuring an ungrateful son who won't shut up about being forced to work in the mines, like there aren't millions of children desperately playing Minecraft to experience such luxury as he gets, a daughter who's luckily so sickly that she won't be much of a problem for long, and a wife whose only real purpose is to surprise you with massive grocery bills that don't go down even when you kill off your own kids, so I suspect some form of embezzlement. The story opens with your assignment. You arrive to the lobby to find the previous landlord being helpfully taken to a new posting by some men with guns, and told you have been injected with a special substance that means you no longer have to sleep. After a quick tutorial, you're led through bugging and then incriminating an unsavory fellow in one of your flats before the game opens up with an initial choice of who you can bring in to replace him. Control-wise, the game is essentially point and click, with movement controlled with the mouse buttons and all interactions from contextual click menus. It does seem to work most of the time, but runs into issues when multiple things are over each other. To simulate your spy camera network, the camera is totally divorced of your character and you are always able to see whatever your cameras can. Collecting information is equally simple. Personality traits learned from actions highlight as green, and you simply click them to add them to your profile of the tenant, while illegal acts, either found contraband or observed actions, show as red. As the game story goes on, what is illegal expands massively, and in your reports you must specify the exact laws broken and the day the law was issued. This is also the case for blackmail letters, because clearly if you cite the wrong case law, nobody will give a shit you recorded them committing a combination of elder abuse and usury. In my first playthrough, I tried to be a reasonable person and cooperated with the authorities when I had to, but tried to do what good I could on the side. When the government told me to evict a perfectly ordinary tenant who had done nothing wrong for seemingly political reasons, I spoke to him and decided to help him with his plan to flee the country, even if it was significantly harder a task than just planting some sinfully delightful and oh so illegal apples in his flat and grassing him up to the police. And that's what makes Beholder good. Unlike Do Not Feed the Monkeys, bills and expenses are frequent and large enough that I was often tempted to do the wrong thing, not just for personal amusement but to actually survive. The first step to getting the tenants out of the country is acquiring an official document that had been lost in the system for the tenant. Luckily, his upstairs neighbour works at the Hall of Records, and for $1,000, Robin bastard, he was able to retrieve it, and next he needed actual passage out the country. Luckily, his neighbour, a doctor, has recently bought cruise tickets for him and his girlfriend, who he's grown to despise and already asked me to take care of and get rid of. All I needed to do was get her convicted of the totally real crime of possessing an unlicensed high-capacity assault apple, and out of relief, the doctor rewards me with the cruise tickets, and I can send my tenant off on his merry way. This is the core gameplay loop of Beholder. The government gives you an order and you must carry it out, and you have multiple choices about how morally you can do that. I could have just bribed or persuaded the tenant to leave, or make use of the day one illegal imported apples readily available from a black market seller who regularly visits. A few weeks later, the neighbour who worked in the archives gets fired and out of desperation snitches out on my bribe, so I end up getting a massive fine. But it isn't all bad, as the next day I'm stabbed to death by another tenant over a parcel dispute. My second playthrough, I was an absolute government golden boy and snitching machine. There wasn't a single vice I wasn't blackmailing people for, and then having you arrested on top of it for the reward money. Only still for certain spoilery expenses being so intense that I ended up having to embezzle money for a family member's funeral, get caught and get sent to a nice little place with lots of men with guns. Overall, I think I did pretty well. Beholder I found very fun. Its more free-form nature with solving problems led me to feel there's still a lot to explore even 10 hours in. and it balances the humour and dark moments very well. My one complaint would be going absolutely the clappers with the blackmailing and planting evidence is very overpowered. Especially with how available the illegal apples are, you can just be pumping all your tenants constantly for that sweet apple hush money like a cross between Tim Cook and the godfather of the Del Monte Mafia. And with that, we end Voyeur Games. This was my first video ever. Usually in these epilogue bits, YouTubers put up those templates that show other uploaded videos. But given that this is my first, I felt like some Time Splitters 2 gameplay will suffice instead. This video took a lot longer and was much harder than I thought it was going to be. I plan to make a lot more though in future than just this, including a sequel showing off more Voyeur games, but that probably won't be the next video. Make sure if you're also interested in film to check out my 3-minute classic film reviews on TikTok under the name Wadsworth. I'll link them in the description. I will be back with more longer videos like this, but we'll be doing experimentation, so don't expect me to commit to any one formula just yet. I am following advice I read from other YouTubers about constantly experimenting with the content I put out until something seems to stick. My next video I am planning to put out should be more in the realm of horror. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see my next videos when they come out, make sure to subscribe. Please also comment and like the video, especially if you have any feedback from me or you just want to help the channel grow. And that's all I have to say, so thank you for watching and goodbye.